Since I was a kid, a long time ago, I used to watch Star Trek, the original one. And I used to get books out of the library with pictures of real robots, like Unimate robots in factories welding car frames. And I thought, this is really cool, this is going to be fun. At some point, I wonder what jobs people will do if the computers and the robots do everything. And maybe we'll end up like in a Star Trek world where there's no money anymore. But that's probably a long way off. So, I'll think about it someday. And as an undergrad, I did electrical engineering. It wasn't quite clear back then whether computer science was a legit thing or not. So I did EE, and it was fun. And probably the best part of EE, I had been playing with electronics before computers, hi-fis and that sort of thing since I was a kid. And in EE, we learned how to analyze circuits. And we might say something like, well, when the voltage at the input of the amplifier goes up, the current through this resistor will go up, and that'll make the current into the base of this transistor go up, which will make the current coming out of the collector go up. We would tell these stories, and we were engineers, we could explain things to you. And then I read a PhD thesis from Johan de Cleer from the MIT Artificial Intelligence Lab. And he wrote a program, and it did just that. It analyzed the circuit. Okay. So I came to the MIT AI lab for grad school. And for my master's thesis, I did a program that could basically an AI system that could help you program. It looks simple compared to what we have now because we didn't have much compute. For my PhD thesis, I did a program that could help do molecular cell biology. Again, simple compared to what we can do now. But in neither of these efforts did I think for a moment, well, very soon we'll have no programmers and no biologists because the AI will do everything. It was kind of a way off. And as I mentioned before, I left. I started a company. I did a bunch of things. And then when I was at Google, actually, people started to work on, you probably nobody's heard of it. Has anybody heard of sequence to sequence? People heard of transformer? Okay, everybody's heard of transformer. Nobody's heard of so seek was actually what came before transformer. Seek was before you were clever enough to know what to look at. And then, anyway. But I was at Google for about 8 years after I sold my company, and then I left. I went back to doing startups in biotech and AI, but still, like the idea that you would really have to change the labor economy was not something that was really a big thing. And then Pi Day last year, March 14, GPT-4 came out. And to me, that was the wake-up call. This was the Turing test capable AI that we've been working on for 40, 50, 60, 70 years, and now we had it. And I said, this is going to be great fun. But now we really need to think about jobs. What's going to happen? And it wasn't just me. If you look, Goldman Sachs came out in the spring, and McKinsey Global in the summer, and others. And they just said, oh, don't worry, this AI program that just came out, the first one, it can just do half of the tasks that a white-collar worker does. Okay, and these things are getting faster all the time and better all the time, as David just explained. So this is something we probably should start thinking about. So I'm here today not to talk about cool new technology, but to talk a little bit about, as a society, what should we do? And I have some suggestions. Now, one thing, obviously, is we need to train kids. It's been important my whole life. I mean, Sputnik was the last time we really got mobilized around STEM education for kids. We should do that again. We should get kids to look at these technologies, to understand them, to use them, so that they're not caught unaware when they get to, at every point, if we still have jobs, if we're not yet at Star Trek's no money economy. But what things should we do as a society? What policy should we have? So one possibility is we could do a universal basic income, a UBI. We could try to jump to the Star Trek economy. It's not a bad idea. It will probably take a while. Are there other things that we could do? Well, one thing we could do is we could start to address some of the issues at a company that make you want to automate a job. And we can't address all of them. But right now, if you look, it's not even a fair fight. Because, for an example, there's a completely unintended government-mandated financial penalty about using a human versus using a robot. If a robot costs me $100 an hour and a human costs me $100 an hour, actually the robot's cheaper because I have to pay payroll tax, I have to pay health insurance. So one thing is that certainly wasn't intended, but now that actually is a structural factor. Maybe we should think about addressing that. Maybe we should think about changing the tax structure so we're not basically disfavoring humans in employment. There are many other things we could do. We could move jobs out of the straight, tough economic competition of for-profit companies. You could have more jobs at the NIH, the National Institutes of Health, at other government labs, at NASA. You could look at doing more, put more into the nonprofits. You could look at, personally, I think healthcare, nurses, childcare, elder care. There are options where even if the computer could do everything, could process all the information, you probably want a human. I mean, we're information processors, but we're humans. We care a lot about other humans. And so I think there are things like that we could do. But the reason I'm talking here at this conference about business is I actually think this is a business issue also. I don't think it can be left. Real issues in our society, we don't just leave to the government. And I think this is actually something that we should look to big companies for. And I have at least one example. So, 10 years ago, a company you'd expect they'd be optimizing for the financial bottom line. That was their job, and that was fine. But it's now unacceptable, for example, to be polluting like crazy and to say, well, I'm optimizing for the bottom line. It's like, no, we now demand that you also worry about taking care of the planet. And we're not very happy or friendly with companies that completely ignore the planet, which is great. So there's at least a second bottom line that we've integrated into our value system. I kind of think now we probably need a third bottom line. We need to think a little bit about employment. I create companies all the time. I worked at Google, which was a little 20,000 person company when I joined, and when I left 8 years later, it was a 200,000 person company. And there are decisions we make all the time about, should I try to enhance that job or should I make money saving that job? I think we need to start to optimize for humanity. Thanks.